Good afternoon, you wee bastards, and welcome back to another War Thunder video with Koala. The aircraft that you're seeing in front of you never existed. Yep, that's right, pure fantasy. You've been tricked. Koala, you've gone mad. Tons of people have heard of the FJ-4, there's photographs of it, it was in service for years, there were hundreds built. What the hell kind of clickbait video are you pushing here?
Hey, what are you trying to push on us?
Actually, I imagine the comments being more along the lines of, "Oh my god, you're so stupid, kill yourself." Let me explain. The FJ-4 Fury was without a doubt a real aircraft, in service with the US Navy for over a decade. The FJ-4b is of course one heavily produced variant of that aircraft. I know all of this, I'm Scottish, not stupid. I actually love this aircraft, I'm sure those of you who saw my last video on it will have been able to guess that, so what am I saying about it not existing? No, I'm not talking about the VMF-232 designation of this aircraft, or the AGM-12 bullpup air-to-ground guided missiles on this model either. That's all fine and dandy. No, what I'm talking about is the fact that Gaijin has gone and given us such a poor representation of the legendary FJ-4. Oh, it actually hurts to call it that. The first and most easily fixed issue is the visual model of this aircraft, which has some nitpicky flaws and some massive ones. Like this one, right here. The FJ-4 Fury in-game has a standard old-school elevator that moves up and down to guide the plane along with the rudder. This never existed. Now the thumbnail makes sense, right? So clever. In real life, the FJ-4 had what is known as an all-flying tail, which acts quite differently. The official name for this is a stabilator, and what that means is that the whole tailplane pivots up and down at the point where it joins the fuselage of the aircraft. You'll likely have seen this system on most modern aircraft, especially jet fighters, as it vastly improves the aircraft handling characteristics at both low and high airspeeds. Funnily enough though, we already see this in game too, on most models of the Sabre. The FJ-4 was designed to replace the older FJ-3 Fury, which was a much more simple modification of a United States Air Force F-86 Sabre for naval operations. Specifically, the FJ-2 and FJ-3 came from the F-86E variant of the Sabre. This model was the first of the Sabres to incorporate the all-flying tail design, and all of the F-Sabres have it too. The FJ-4 kept this characteristic, despite being a far more radical redesign of a Sabre jet. Now, I'm not going to go too in-depth about the history of the FJ-4 here, you can check my older video on it for that. When I first brought this horrific eyesore up on my Discord, somebody said that in photographs of the FJ-4 you can clearly see a separated section that makes it look as if the plane has an old-fashioned elevator system rather than an all-flying tail. But if you look in-game, or at the screen right now, the Sabres have this too. Is this another inaccuracy? No. Actually, the F-model Sabres, the Fury, and many other aircraft from this era have both systems, working in tandem. That's the difference between a stabilizer, where the whole flying tail is one piece, as seen on modern jet fighters, and a stabilator, where an old school elevator like the one, say, on an older A5 model Sabre is present, but it moves in tandem with the rear wing itself, creating more of a camber, the curvature on an otherwise flat surface. This is something that also needs to be modelled on the Sabres and the Sea Venom, to use another example. The elevator and stabilizer should move independently of each other in the same direction. This feature is one of the primary things that gives a lot of jets their signature drifting characteristics in a high G turn, something you can see the G91 doing here, despite this aircraft not having the all-flying tail. This is just because the G91 is so ridiculously light for the power its engines create. Doesn't exactly do much for the effectiveness of the aircraft, but it is in my opinion one of the sickest parts of jet dogfights. In some aircraft, the elevator can be moved separately and used as a trim tab, which is what I initially thought this was in the FJ-4, but digging into it a little reveals this to just be a blatant inaccuracy on the modelling of this aircraft. I've no idea whether the turning performance of the aircraft is accurate or not. This may be something that is only a visual modelling error, but it is possible that the turning characteristics are tied to this elevator, and that providing the aircraft with the all-flying tail it should have would also vastly increase its manoeuvrability, which would make it one seriously powerful jet fighter already. The real-life FJ-4 also features leading-edge slats that can be found in-game on the A5 Sabre and I believe the Japanese F-40 as well, but for some reason are not modelled on the Fury. This feature is another that improves the manoeuvrability of an aircraft in real life. Other visual inaccuracies include the squareness of the air intake, which is in real life much more square looking than that of the Sabre, but not to the degree that Gaijin has modelled it with. The shape of the fuselage is also incorrect, something that can easily be seen by viewing the undercarriage. It should taper more towards the tail and bulge more underneath the cockpit section. The signature dorsal spine of the FJ-4, as well as the vertical tailplane and cockpit, all seem to be perfect. However, the aircraft itself is slightly too long, disproportionately, and I believe this is due to the air intake for the engine sitting too far forward of the cockpit. Fixing this may eliminate the issue of the fuselage seeming too narrow at the front. The wings also sit too low on the airframe, giving the plane a bulge underneath the wing root, which makes it look unrealistically chunky at the front. Now, all this may seem a little nitpicky, but well, you're right, it's nitpicky. I just want it to be corrected. I love the way the Fury looks in real life, and this realization of it is derpy, to say the least. Time for something that's not so nitpicky though, the actual in-game performance stats of the aircraft, which are even further from the truth than the visual model. A very quick Google search will confirm Wikipedia's statistics that the FJ-4's top speed at sea level was 1,094 km per hour in level flight, whereas in game, come on Gaijin, that was an easy one. A little more significant, however, this aircraft's service ceiling in real life was just shy of 14.5 kilometers above sea level, and just a tad below that, at 12.2 kilometers, the plane was capable of speeds of above Mach 1, which is 1062 kph at that altitude, give or take. Actually, at altitudes between 11 and 12 kilometers, the FJ-4 Fury was capable of Mach 1.15, or in other words, 1200 kph. This would mean that the service ceiling of 14.3 kilometers was more due to aspects such as pressurization and engine cooling rather than the aircraft's raw ability to get higher. These speeds were level flight of the Fury. I mean, it's not like it can really dive to gain speed when it's already at just above the minimum altitude to reach those speeds, while at the same time being just below its own maximum serviceable altitude. So, we've climbed the FJ-4b up to altitude in a custom battle. Let's turn on the HUD and see just how fast... Oh, come on! That's right, guys. At these altitudes, the FJ-4 cannot even accelerate above its own goddamn stall speed, let alone reach the speed of sound or higher. This is without any sort of ordnance attached and running minimum fuel, which is something the real-life aircraft would not be doing, while still retaining the ability to travel at the aforementioned speed and altitude. By the way, for any of you who are wondering, the FJ-4 and FJ-4b differed in only one way. The FJ-4b has 2 additional pylons on the wings for ordnance, so it's not an issue of me having stats for the wrong variant. There was no change to the performance characteristics of the aircraft. At the very least, the real-life aircraft would probably not be able to reach these speeds at this altitude while having ordnance under its wings, but it would still be quite capable of much higher speeds than the plane we have, probably around 900 km per hour. Now, I'll be honest, I'm not quite sure the way IAS or indicated airspeed and Mach relate to each other both in War Thunder and IRL, so the top speed of the FJ-4 being 1200 km per hour or thereabouts at 12,000 meters altitude may be judged in ground speed. It seems a little bit weird to say that the FJ-4 of the 1950s could travel at over 2,000 kilometers ground speed. Therefore, the FJ-4 we have is holding half its real life speed at that altitude. Well done, Gaijin. Fucking incredible. It's also not able to dive to the same speed as the Sabres in-game, despite it being designed with the sole purpose of being better than the Sabre, even as a fighter. By this point, both the Navy and Air Force were starting to develop fighters that would beat out the Sabre, and the FJ-4 was intended to be one of them. It couldn't hold a higher top speed than the F-86, despite having a much more powerful engine developing 7,800 pounds of thrust, as it was also much heavier, partially down to increased fuel storage, but this should actually improve the dive speed of the Fury, not hinder it. The Fury's guns are pathetically poor too, as they should have a very similar firing rate, velocity and all-round ballistics to the F-86 F2 Sabre's FMC T-160 revolver cannons, but in-game are modelled as if they were AN M320mm found on earlier jets like the Banshee, Panthers and Cougar. Another very meaningful inaccuracy that I'm sure Gaijin is going to get around to fixing, right? I mean, you already have the model for these cannons done. What is... Why? Gah. The plane we have in-game is not capable of reaching above about 13,350 meters altitude, as it can't even fly above its own stall speed up there, so obviously that max altitude reading of 14,300 meters is... Wait. What? It's higher? It's fucking higher?
You serious?
That's right, the FJ-4's listed service ceiling in War Thunder is unrealistically high by several hundred meters. I honestly find that kind of hilarious given how poor every other characteristic of this aircraft is in game compared to real life. How the hell could you screw up this bad, Gaijin? Oh god. By the way, before you all get salty in the comments, I'm not saying that the FJ-4b is a bad aircraft in game. I've seen a lot of MiG pilots treating the Fury as a non-threat in RRB, and getting their asses handed to them for underestimating this plane as a fighter. It's at least decent, and while some people will say that the aircraft I'm currently flying, the VMF-232 Squadron Fury from the latest Operation Summer event, is even slightly overpowered as a close air support aircraft with its 5 AGM-12 bullpup air-to-ground guided missiles, think of the regular tech tree's FJ-4b Fury, and how it is missing all these aspects, both visually and performance-wise. This aircraft doesn't have the missiles, it's certainly not overpowered, but it should be a much more capable fighter, and it's been trashed. Now, this is not the only or the first vehicle to be implemented into this game unhistorically. We all know the Panther II and Tiger 105, neither of these vehicles ever existed, and the Tiger 105 was actually physically impossible to build. It was never anything more than a drawing. The Ho-Ri in real life was never completed past a wooden mock-up stage. I've talked about that recently, and yet we have a prototype and even a production model, which, if it is modelled off of the design blueprint for the Ho-Ri 2, is missing 2 turreted 25mm autocannons and a coaxial secondary 37mm cannon. The R2Y2s were never built, none of them, and the Coelian was never built either. The Type 90 and Leopard 2A4 have unhistorically poor armor protection, and the Abrams is missing shells, the XM1 is missing a lot of armor, shells, and should have a 6-second reload rate, as should the later variants of the M60 Patton series. The Horton 229 and Leopard 2K that we see in game never existed in the exact form that we see them. The Horton has the wrong guns, it should have either 4 20mm MG151s or 2 30mm MK108s, not 103s. And the wings and engines, it's actually Gaijin's own mixture of 3 different prototypes that I believe were only partially completed, and the Leopard 2K is the same. It's a mix of different vehicles that did exist to create a variation that did not. Similarly, the F9F8 Cougar is unhistorically poor in its performance, being another aircraft developed in the 50s with the express purpose of rivaling the Sabre in combat effectiveness. However, it should be noted that combat effectiveness in real life relates to a lot of aspects that we just don't see in War Thunder, such as all-weather capabilities, fuel capacity and therefore range, ordnance capability, avionics, service ceiling, and of course some of the jets we see, like the Cougar, carried guided air-to-air missiles, like the AIM-9 Sidewinder, while the Sabre did not. Nevertheless, the Cougar's raw flight performance in-game is lesser compared to that of its real-life counterpart, but not even close to the level of the Fury. The FJ-4b Fury has to be, without a doubt, the poorest representation of a vehicle I know of, and I've been playing this game for 5 years, seen adjustments to flight models, visual models. This one is just insanely poor form, Gaijin. Now, if the FJ-4 were implemented in a realistic way, it would easily rival the best fighters in the game, but add to that the fact that it would be the fastest aircraft in the game at high altitude, it may be slightly broken in all honesty, because of its ability to run from pursuers at high altitudes, which is why I'm going to say this. Don't add the damn vehicles in the first place if you can't balance them realistically. Seriously, who at Gaijin honestly thought that this piece of frog shit was an okay thing to do? Ay. History, realism, accuracy, are these no longer even remote concerns of this company? Is close enough all we're bothering with now? Now, I apologise for the way this video turned out. A bit of a rant, that wasn't my original intention. It just significantly pisses me off the way Gaijin's chosen to go about this. And once again, I'm not talking about the missiles. I actually love the introduction of these guided missiles. I think they're so cool, even if they don't really work for me. ATGMs on the ground already spaz out to the point where they're completely unusable thanks to my ping, and in the air that's proven to be just as bad, if not worse. So it's likely that helicopters ATGMs won't work either. Still waiting on that Australian server, Gaijin. I love the way this has been modelled now that the camera guidance has been removed. I don't think they're too imbalanced, they're just being spammed out right now as of making this video because they're brand new, and everyone's up in arms about how unfair it is. Trust me, other nations will get similar weapon systems soon. America was the first nation to get a 9.0 premium, now other nations are following suit. Side note, I'd love how nobody got all testy like this when the Germans were the first nation to receive guided ordnance of any type in the Fritz X guided bomb, even though there are at the very least Russian and American counterparts to that weapon system, which we still don't have. It's almost like German players have double standards, but that can't be true. I love what these air-to-ground missiles might mean for the future of jet development in War Thunder, and I'm glad we have this plane in the game at all. The missiles thrill me, so well done to Gaijin on that front, but what the plane is right now is just insulting to those of us who, like myself, are long-term fans of aircraft in War Thunder, experienced jet pilots, and especially to us Tier 6 jet enthusiasts. It doesn't necessarily surprise me how this aircraft has been abused to make it fit into the existing game without any work. Gaijin does have an infamous habit of neglecting air battles these days, but I wanted to make sure everybody is aware of just how ridiculous this model is, so that perhaps it can be fixed in future, and we can have a proper FJ-4 Fury. Once again, like my video on the BMP-2, consider this more a suggestion to Gaijin to help them fix an issue, rather than an attack. That is not what this is meant to be. Even if that doesn't happen for a long time, I hope it helps to prevent Gaijin from abusing other new vehicles this way, just to be close enough to using the game, without much work having to be done to the game itself to fit vehicles in. That's just not good enough. If we get F4 Phantoms and MiG-21s that have no missiles and can't travel above 1200 kilometers an hour,
and I'm gonna lose it.
I guess it's just the salty old War Thunder pilot and me coming back to the surface after playing tanks and even ships for so long. Even if the flight performance of this aircraft doesn't get fixed, I at least hope it's adjusted closer to realism, more for the sake of the tech tree FJ-4b than this one. And the visual model is certainly something that needs to be fixed, as well as, like I mentioned, the Sabres and Sea Venom stabilators. Also, if there are any other aircraft that need this model that I haven't mentioned, please let me know in the comments below. Anyway lads, that's going to be it for this video. I hope you enjoyed and found it informative, and that if you did, you share it around to kind of raise the awareness about this issue. I know that sounds cringy, but this is the only way something like this is going to get fixed, and fixing things is what everyone wants Gaijin to do, so let's push at them until they do. We, as players of this game, the customers and patrons of this company, have a surprising amount of power over the game's development if we band together and make sure Gaijin hears us. They're statistics that tell them what should be added or changed. Guys, that is us. We are their statistics, the players. So if you're someone who, like me, wants to see the real FJ-4 Fury come into the game instead of this sad, sorry piece of horse shit, share this video around with your friends on social media, on forums, everywhere. Let's make sure Gaijin hears us. The extra exposure for my channel won't hurt either. #sellout. So please guys, let me know your thoughts on everything I've said in this video down below in the comments. I'd love discussing further with you guys, and most of you have constructive or supportive things to say most of the time. If you do want to question or discuss a specific point I said here, do me a favour and leave a timestamp to when I said it in your comment. This has been a long video, so it just eases my time and prevents confusion. If you want to come chat with me about this or anything else, feel free to join my Discord server, link in the description, and don't forget to follow me on Twitter and Instagram as well. I also want to give a big thanks to my supporters over on Patreon, and if you guys would like to join them, just know that I hugely appreciate it. Even a little goes a long way in helping me make these videos, so check out the link in the description. Plenty of fun new stuff planned for the coming couple of weeks on the channel before the patch drops, as well as I will definitely be covering the new content once it does. Please don't think that I'm not super excited for helicopters, I can't wait. And if enough buzz comes from this video, I might make a follow-up to it, answering some of you guys' comments. But until then, always remember, keep your bagpipes to hand and your kilt on, and I'll see you lads next video.